Hey girls, today we're going to talk about other punctuation marks for using in our writing. Most of you are pretty comfortable using punctuation marks, but I just want to give you a few reminders because I have noticed some errors in your writing. So today let's go ahead and take notes in the editing section of our writer's notebook. Alright, so first let's talk about quotation marks. We use quotation marks for three things: to show dialogue in our own writing, like when we're doing creative writing, to indicate borrowed quotations in essays, and to indicate titles of short works, little things like poems or TV episode titles or short story titles. So we're all familiar with dialogue. That's when we have one character saying blah, 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 he said, and then blah, 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 she replied. But remember that the comma goes inside the quotation marks and that the quote is part of your own sentence. We also use quotation marks to show a borrowed quotation. So that's when we're citing somebody else. So here's an example. The authors state, citing quotations can be boring. And then we have the citation at the end. There you'll notice that the comma doesn't go after the quotation itself. In fact, it goes before. And then we have the citation at the end of the sentence with the author's last names and the page number, followed by the period. We also use quotation marks to indicate short titles. So that could be a poem, like we read before, A Raisin in the Sun, called A Dream Deferred. Or it could be a single episode of a TV show, like The Treehouse of Horrors, Volume 19 from The Simpsons. So The Treehouse of Horrors is the TV show, so that goes in quotation marks. But The Simpsons, the overall show, is different, and I'll talk about that in a second. So an apostrophe is our next our next punctuation mark, and it indicates possession or ownership, and it also can indicate contractions, so when you're taking letters out of a word. So possession is when somebody owns something. So the cat's dish means the dish of the cat, or the cat's dishes, the plural, is also has an apostrophe because it's possessive, and in this case, because it's plural, the apostrophe goes after the S. So we always want to use an apostrophe to show possession, ownership. We also want to use an apostrophe to show a contraction, and that's when the apostrophe takes the place of the missing letters. I am becomes I'm, I apostrophe am, and the apostrophe goes in place of the missing letters. Great. So the next type of punctuation I want to talk about is actually text formatting. It's italics, and it's the same thing as underlining, and it means that you're talking about a bigger work, something like a novel, a play, a TV series, or a movie, something that you have to sit on your booty for a long time in order to watch or to read. So that's why it would get underlined or italicized. So A Raisin in the Sun is a play. It gets italicized. So does the TV show Keeping Up with the Kardashians. It's a whole big work. If you watched all of it, you would need to sit for a long time, so it gets underlined or italicized. A colon is the next punctuation mark we'll talk about today. It indicates that a list will come after it, or it puts emphasis on a word or phrase that's really important in your sentence. So here's how you use a colon to introduce a list. I brought 3 items, colon, a pen, comma, a notebook, comma, and a mug. So if you had like a grocery list and you wrote grocery list at the top, you could put a colon and then follow it with the items you want to buy. But a colon can also be used to emphasize something important. Here's an example. I can't tell you how much I loved one thing, cupcakes, right? And so that colon creates the pause before the thing that you really love, and it really puts emphasis on it. The next punctuation mark I want to talk about, and the last one, is the semicolon. This is my favorite punctuation mark. A semicolon allows you to combine 2 complete sentences. You want to use a semicolon when you want to form a bond between 2 statements, typically when they are related to or contrast with one another. In this example above, the relationship between gnawing on tires and combating bears is strengthened by using a semicolon. So here's the example. I gnaw on old car tires, semicolon. It strengthens my jaw, so I'll be better conditioned for bear combat. Okay? You want to use a semicolon to connect sentences that contain internal punctuation also. So the first dinosaur says, I've got all these commas. How can we ever be together without forming a run-on sentence? And the second dinosaur says, nothing can stop true love. Use a semicolon, you fool. And then here's another example using a semicolon. When dinosaurs agree on something, they'll often high-five one another, semicolon. Dinosaurs are all about high fives. So you can see that the first sentence has a comma inside of it, and so that's why you need the semicolon to link the first sentence to the second sentence. If you used a comma, it would have resulted in a comma splice or a run-on sentence. If you'd used a period, you'd lose the connection between the two clauses. So the semicolon allows you to connect those two related ideas. Now let's practice. One person per partnership should go ahead and log on to Socrative, and I have some examples. You're going to help me punctuate. Thanks, girls.